Hello, I'm Harley Schlanger, the Schiller Institute. Welcome to this week's International Strategic Webcast by Helga zepp-larouche, who is the founder and the president of the Schiller Institute, and who is at the forefront of the fight for bringing together a new paradigm to replace the collapsing, dangerous old paradigm of geopolitical confrontation. There have been more developments in the last week that have consolidated the new paradigm following the BRICS summit, a whole series of new initiatives, dialogues opening, dialogues continuing, and of course, hysterical reactions coming from the City of London and the neocons in the United States. Helga, why don't we start with the continuing momentum from the BRICS summit, because there's a lot to report. Why don't you give us an update on what you know about that?
Yes, we had discussed this last week, but in the meantime, it is more reports that have come out that it was not just the BRICS, but you had not just BRICS plus, like many important developing countries participating, but actually you had almost the majority of all important developing country organizations, such as the G77, Mercosur, the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Countries, many regional organizations. And one can really say that what is on the new Silk Road spirit, which is now capturing the majority of the nations, at least of the Southern Hemisphere and the developing sector. So this is creating completely different conditions, so that many conflicts which seem to be completely unresolvable can now work in a peaceful direction. And I give you just one example with the new head of Pakistan, Imran Khan, who basically said that Pakistan will follow the Chinese model. But he also said that he wants a rapprochement with India, and that for every step India makes in respect to Pakistan, he is willing to do two steps. So, there is actually for the first time the possibility of resolving the India-Pakistan conflict. And, it's also the first time that the Russian military has military maneuvers together with Pakistan. Now, China obviously plays a big role in Pakistan. Russia has very good relations with India. And now, in the new spirit of the SCO, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and, the BRICS Global South, how they call this new development, makes it possible to resolve this conflict. And another one, apart from North Korea, which we discussed already, which is contrary to the media lies, on a very good track. It's moving forward in the right way. There is also now, in the new Silk Road spirit, for the first time, a rapprochement between Somalia, Djibouti, Eritrea, and Ethiopia. And, in this context, the Houthi leader in the move towards peace. So I think all of these developments are really absolutely fantastic, and they show that under the leadership of the BRICS, especially naturally China, Russia, and India, and South Africa and Brazil with it, but there is an effort to replace the old collapsed geopolitical order with a new system of international relationships, which I think is very, very promising. And it's too bad that our mainstream media in the West are so gleichgeschaltet, so absolutely controlled, that it's because the media just don't report it. But that doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So therefore, I appeal to you, our viewers, to make sure that this program becomes more known, shared among your friends and acquaintances, and join the Schiller Institute, because we have to get the West to participate in this shaping new world economic.
Example that you've brought up and that the Schiller Institute has been very much involved in promoting is the move to,
especially in Europe, has been completely destabilized and shaken up by the refugee crisis, that they would be among the first ones to report this. But no, they don't. But it is a fact that the governor of Aleppo has basically announced a three-part program. The first one is to rebuild the infrastructure. The second one is to help every single affected family, and thirdly, to bring them safely back in the reconstructed Aleppo. And there is also a Russian refugee center in Syria where refugees return from Jordan, from Lebanon, from Turkey, and are being then brought back into their respective regions. So you would think that this is top news, that the refugee crisis can be solved by rebuilding the country. And, it is just a complete scandal because, all I can say is the story about who is financing and who has created the white helmets and who has, invented the narrative against Syria. This should all come out and will come out, and the criminals should find justice.
The fight between Trump and the Europeans at the recent NATO summit, the attack that goes on constantly against the Italians in the EU press, and now here.
Well, I think it it found some coverage, but the meeting is really historic because the Trump and unity does not exist, and it will not exist because the policies of the EU are such that they make enemy is very positive.
And part of that is the new government that's come into power in Italy was not only opposed by the EU bureaucracy, but one of the reasons they were being opposed is their support for, at least among some of the Lega party, London, threatening Europe that they will not provide backup for derivatives. I mean, this thing is set to explode, isn't it?
Yes, there is very clear panic because the Brexit to keep control over the European derivative trading. The fact that Deutsche Bank moved their derivative trading to Frankfurt was commented by a multi-billionaire, I think, Sir Alan Sugar, not so sweet, but that's his name. And he said that that fact that Deutsche Bank moved their derivative trading to Frankfurt is the beginning of the end of the financial would draw a lesson from this.
The solution is more funny money from the central banks, whereas the Chinese are saying more production, more investment. And that, of course, is the message that you and your husband have been fighting for years. Now, I want to bring up another example of what we were talking about. Keisha Rogers, who's
a member of one of the victims, and you would look at the documents and then you come to the part where it says, and the following persons have proven to be guilty for this, and then it's blacked out. And he said that these family members have the absolute right to know who is responsible for the death of their beloved ones. Now, quite interesting in this context is that an FBI agent who was the one who warned already in July 2001 that there were plans by Saudi Arabia to plan a terrorist attack in the United States, which obviously was not followed up at the time. He said that he was told to do everything in his power to prevent the families of suing Saudi Arabia. And he said that he basically now feels it is his duty to speak out on this. So I think, that and the fact that Congressman Núñez demanded that all the documents related to the FISA warrant around the Steele dossier and the whole, coup against Trump should all be declassified. He said if the American people could read this, they would be shocked. And he promised that despite the recess of the Congress, that his committee would stay in August and work, overtime to have interviews, to have people subpoenaed, investigate them. and absolutely stay at it. So I think, we have not seen this end of it, and the chances, that it could happen, what Trump had, suggested in a tweet 2, 3 days ago, that Sessions should just shut down the switch hunt, and that Mueller had basically was so full of conflict of interest that it should be just shut down. This could actually happen, and maybe some criminal prosecution against the guilty ones would follow. So I think we need to absolutely support this demand that the documents around the 9/11 be declassified, because this is one of the three areas which points to the role of Robert Mueller. Not the only case, but one of them, and therefore I think it is extremely important if the United States is supposed to go back to be a full constitutional republic and undo the damage of 9/11 and everything which came with it.
Well, it's not surprising that Mueller was trying to use classification and other means to suppress the emergence of these documents. I saw on YouTube about a 1-minute clip the other day of Mueller testifying before the Congress, endorsing fully the war against Iraq and saying that there's absolute evidence that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction. So he was part of developing the narrative that led to the war, which played a very significant role in Trump's election victory when he attacked George W. Bush for lying to the American people over this. Now, another story that has to come out is the situation around Ukraine. Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, has been involved in some discussions recently about the reality of Ukraine, that it is the government of Ukraine, the Kiev regime, which is blocking any progress. Helga, is there any chance that this is going to come to fruition in the EU, or is this going to continue to be a sticking point between improvement of Western relations with Russia?
Well, what Lavrov actually said is that behind closed doors, many of the Western leaders admit that they absolutely are aware that Kiev is controlled by Nazis, but that they don't have the courage to basically come out and admit it. Now, this is an ongoing thing, because you see that not only did the Obama administration, Victoria Nuland, the EU, back this coup in Ukraine, but they're doing exactly the same, or trying to do the same thing again in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe had just an election where the ruling party was elected with an overwhelming majority of, I forgot now, I think around 80% or something. And Elmar Brok was there, as Elmar Brok is a European Parliament parliamentarian, pretty much identical with the Bertelsmann Foundation, and he has played a leading role in the Maidan, cheering on the demonstrators and basically steering it on. And he was the only election observer of many organizations in Zimbabwe who found any obstacle. So he basically demanded, that the election results should be published immediately, even if it normally takes 5 days until all the results are there. So he said this is because of mistrust to the electoral college or the electoral board. And this was then the trigger point for the movement for democratic change, basically to call for riots. They started to burn down property, cars, and in the context of this violence, 3 people were killed and many wounded. So there is video footage of these things, so we can expect that there will be some follow-up, because to incite people for violence and then have people killed for sure is a crime which will be found, which will find appropriate response. But you can really see the EU is not only blocking the collaboration with China in Africa or other matters, other areas, but they continue their policy of regime change, of destabilization, and they should just be denounced, and this should stop.
Well, Helga, we've covered a lot. Is there anything else that we've missed that you want to bring up?
No, I just want to really come back to where we started, that there is so much reason for hope. I mean, if you have now a peace process involving India, Pakistan, the Koreas, the Horn of Africa, and you have an absolute commitment for overcoming underdevelopment and poverty in the developing countries. Now, this is just a reason for joy, and I think it is really the reality of the future, and not the hysteria which is created by many forces in the West. Germany, for example, is a sad example. They are using this heat wave, which naturally is causing terrible damage for the farmers and in general. But they're using that to go completely overboard, say, we now need to absolutely go out of coal altogether to reduce the CO2. And we should have a commission on traffic to discuss how to reduce traffic. I mean, all of Africa will soon have nuclear plants, and they are perfectly manageable. Putin at the BRICS summit said that Russia will help to light up Africa and give electricity to the 600 million people in Africa who still don't have it, and focus especially not only on gas and oil, but especially on nuclear energy, where Russia is in the meantime the world technological leader. And many other developing countries are going in the same direction of building nuclear plants, which are absolutely manageable by humanity. And if countries like Germany remain in their super greeny fit, it is